Be seated. Esayenai Eharim Me'ayin Yavo Ezri Esayenai Eharim Me'ayin Yavo Ezri Ezri Mehim Adonai Osei Shemayim Va'aretz. These words from Psalm talk about, from where will my help come from? I lift my eyes to the mountains. In Hebrew, the word for mountains are harim, very similar to the word horim, which are parents. They're the figures in our lives that are there for us whenever we need to turn to them. And here we are on this beautiful day, mourning the loss of a mountain of a woman, of our dear Pat Schanzer. And so we look to help. Where can we find our help? We turn to prayer, and we turn around looking in this room of all those who have come here to be here, to support one another as we remember her. And may Pat always be remembered for a blessing. Our task right now is to feel the full range of being a human being, the pesky business of being a human being with everything that it comes with, the joys, the pains, the challenges, the pleasant surprises. All of that is what makes a remarkable life. And all of that was held by our dear Pat. Pat has found peace now. She's no longer in pain, leaving us to mourn and remember the beautiful spirit that she was. This time, I'd like to invite Bob, Gary, and David to rise and to help light this memorial candle. You'll see the lighter is right behind one of the pictures. And as you light the candle, please light it now. You have to, yeah. Yeah, it's one of those. And I'll read this poem. In the glow of the candlelight, we remember her spirit so bright. She poured her love into each day, guiding her family along the way. A woman of strength with a heart so deep, her memory in our hearts we keep. As the flame dances, our thoughts entwined, recalling a life both sacred and kind. She led with quiet, gentle grace. In her warmth, we still find our place. As the light flickers, our prayers ascend to the heavens where her soul transcends. Her memory remains a lasting light. In our hearts, she shines ever bright. She shines ever bright in the family right here. You know, Pat and Bob raised a beautiful family that grew and grew. David married Elizabeth and their children, Hannah, Daniel, and Emily, and Gary married Valerie and their children, Eric and Natalie, and of course, Pat's brother, Dick. And so the candle becomes a beautiful metaphor for life. And I think especially for Pat. Giving, it's right there, a gentle warmth. And so throughout this service today, I invite you to use the candle as a sort of meditation to understand the fragility of life, how it lives in two worlds at the same time. On one hand, it's grounded in the wick, in the earthly, and at the very same time, it's sort of constantly ascending to something that's beyond, something that's almost not real, that if you touch it, you wouldn't even necessarily feel it, except you can feel its warmth and you can see its light. And so we thank you and bless you, source of light, life and love, for the blessings of life that we shared and the warmth with which Pat enriched our lives and the sacred act of remembering. We also turn to the Psalms because they can be a source of wisdom and comfort. Adonai, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath. Our days are like a passing shadow. We come and we go like grass. In the morning it shoots up, renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, return. Would that we were wise and we understood what we are doing. When we die, we carry nothing away. Our wealth does not accompany us. You watch over the wholehearted and look after the upright, for in the end they will have peace. Pat shall have peace. Adonai, you redeem the souls of your servants, and none who trust in you shall be desolate. In a moment, I'm going to call up Pat's family to share words. They say, according to tradition, that words that come from the heart enter the heart. And it's a true gift to take these memories and these stories and share them with us. They become part of our collective memory as well. And so when we say about someone in Judaism, may their memory be for a blessing, the rabbis like to be very particular. We don't say may their name be for a blessing, but their memory. You see, the memories that we share, the memories that continue to come alive, the memories that I overheard when I was sitting with Bob, Gary, and David as they shared stories. It felt a little bit like the Passover Seder, telling these same stories and saying, oh, I heard it like that. I heard it like that. We've all been in a situation. And even if they knew the story, there was something so beautiful and powerful about hearing that story again, but maybe from a different angle, from a different sibling. And it's very fitting as we enter into the season of Passover to understand the power of telling these important stories from one generation to the next. So I'm going to invite first Gary, then the grandchildren will come up all together, and then David will share some words.
That's not good. Okay, I have a bit of a problem. Give me 1 minute. I'm gonna have to turn my phone back on. Because I seem to be missing a page. So that's off to a rollicking start, but I will have to do that from my phone. So first of all, while I'm doing this, I just want to thank everybody for coming. And I'm gonna start with is reading a few words from my Uncle Dick, who unfortunately couldn't be with us here today. But I know he's here in spirit and is listening in on the live stream. So I'm going to take my time to do this right. Okay. Uh, okay. All right. I'm going to start with my piece, and then we'll find another time to read from Uncle Dick. So the life of our family changed dramatically on the day of my mom's car accident almost 8 years ago. I recall eating breakfast with my brother and father one morning before heading to the hospital, and my father saying to both of us, that he thought this was going to be a very tough day. But miraculously, after 6 surgeries in 9 days, she pulled through, endured months of rehab, numerous infections, and some injuries that never healed. We've been blessed to have her with us all of these years, but I think all that knew her well knew she was never quite the same. I recall how hard it was for me at the time of my grandmother Natalie's passing to remember her prior to the dementia that marked just the last 5 years of her life. I can only imagine that it's the same for my kids today. Even more important that we take the time today to remember my mother, who my mother was beforehand. My mom was the ultimate giver. Like many women of her generation, she postponed her teaching career to focus on her family. She was the consummate mother in every way, there for whatever we needed, whenever we needed it. And when she did go back to work, she gave of herself to the special needs children of Manhasset schools and their families, both as a teacher and then as their true advocate, as an administrator. How much I learned from just spending days in her classroom. watching her work with these children. She was always my biggest fan. And during years of plays, musicals, and concerts, we shared a love of singing, along with my Uncle Dick as well, and even in recent years made the trek to Connecticut whenever possible. She gave to her many lifelong friends, many of who are with us today, here or listening in, offering advice and counsel, and particularly those having issues with their kids in schools and the like, since that was my mom's area of expertise. And let's face it, my mom really never enjoyed skiing. Yes, when it was 30 degrees, sunny, no wind, and perfect, pristine packed powder conditions, maybe that was a good day. And if we were lucky, we had 2 or 3 of those a season when we might have skied 30 or 35 days. I have vivid memories of sitting at the bottom of this one pitch on a run called Spruce at Stratton Mountain, that no matter what the conditions were like on the rest of the mountain, this pitch was always a total sheet of ice. Ruth, you know exactly where I'm talking about. Watching my mother, absolutely petrified, trying to navigate her way down with the 8 other members of our extended ski family sitting there somewhat patiently waiting for her to make it down. But every weekend she packed up David, myself, and our dog Sparky in the car every Friday afternoon to pick up my father in Westchester and begin the 4-hour round trip to Vermont. And she did that because she knew how much joy it gave the 3 men in her life. Of course, when my grandmother declined, Mom totally took over, ensuring that she was well cared for in those final years of her life. I remember speaking with her about how hard that transition was. My mom spoke to Natalie every day. She was her mom and was there for advice, counsel, or just a lending ear. And then practically overnight, the roles reversed, and my mom became the caregiver. And then obviously nothing gave her greater joy than giving to all of her grandchildren. If you read the obituary that my brother wrote, you learned that Mom never expected to have a granddaughter. So when I learned this, and I think it was the first time any of us heard this, was during a trip to Vermont, shortly after Eric was born, when several of our friends joined us at my parents' house in Vermont for a New Year's Eve weekend. Eric was the firstborn of any of our close friends at the time, and he was quite the center of attention. And there was a lot of discussion about future kids and having boys and having girls and the like. And my mom was sitting on a chair working, head in the computer, and without ever lifting up, she chimed in, "Neither of my children have a chance in hell of ever having a girl." 4 granddaughters later, I guess someone was listening. Mom was immensely proud of her 1 grandson and all 4 of her granddaughters. I know I'm not supposed to apologize, right? We were so blessed to have her at Eric and Sarah's wedding last October. And how tragically ironic that Mom's accident was on the way home from the inn, the soup kitchen on Long Island, where my mom gave of her time for years to those less fortunate. Of course, in this last stage of her life, it was Mom who needed the help of those around her. The transformation of my father to the full-time caregiver was truly remarkable. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, these were not things my father did a lot of for most of my life. Managing their social calendar, not only did my father take on these responsibilities, but he did so willingly and gracefully. He continued to find joy in her companionship no matter the circumstances. I'll be forever grateful to him for that, and I can only hope I've learned that lesson well. So thank you, Mom, for teaching me the importance of giving yourself to others. I can only hope I come close to living up to the example you set for all of us. And now I was able to pull up what my uncle said, so I'm going to read that. Dick, I'm not going to let you down, I promise. Throughout my childhood, Pat was a hard act to follow. She was 2 years ahead of me at school, a much better student and more popular in her circle of friends, but she always had time for me, and we got along very well. Where I caught up with her was with music. We both had very nice singing voices, which I will attest to. One of my fondest memories was when we sang a duet to a song named Old Kentucky Home. I would hold the long notes while she inserted a counter melody, harmonizing at the end. Then we would switch parts with Pat holding the long notes while I inserted the counter melody. We did it so well that we performed the song for our mother's dinner guests and received thunderous applause. I was so proud when I received a letter from Pat while I was stationed at Guantanamo telling me that I would become an uncle for the first time. I was so proud and happy. I went running around the base telling everyone I saw. I was so happy to see Pat at Eric's wedding. I almost cried when Pat told me I was a good brother. That meant so much to me. No matter how far apart we lived from each other, I believe we always shared a deep love for each other. I will miss my sister terribly and will keep all those wonderful memories close to my heart. So thank you, Dick, and we miss having you here, but we know you're with us in spirit. Thank you.
So I guess I'm used to leading this off. I'm Eric. I am the only, and as I was told frequently, favorite grandson. Yeah, again, speaking of tough acts to follow, it was just incredible words from my father there. But one of the first stories I'm going to tell is, so even though she may not have enjoyed skiing that much, I think she really did get a ton of joy out of watching all of us learn to ski. And there's a story. Oh, sorry. And there's a story that that my parents used to tell me about when I was it was Cubs at Stratton, which was the kids ski program. And apparently my grandmother wanted to make sure that we were kind of being well taken care of. So she would actually hide behind a tree to watch us during our lessons, just knowing that if I got a glimpse of anyone, I would probably burst into tears at any moment, as kids are liable to do during ski school. But no, she was always looking out for us and making sure that we were kind of on the right path with everything. And even in her later years, when things got more difficult, that didn't really change. So I remember when I kind of first graduated college, the questions I kept getting were, when are you going to get a girlfriend? Finally found a girlfriend in Sarah, who became my wife, and it was so great having her at the wedding. But then the next question obviously was, when are you getting married? Eventually, we got engaged. That happened. And then there was just kind of one final question, which we unfortunately weren't able to take care of, which was, when am I getting great grandchildren? But no, she was always there to make sure we were on the right path, and just again was really the glue that kept our family in a really good place. So, but we're gonna miss her terribly.
All right. Having Pat Schanzer as your grandmother meant that there was always someone in the world that loved you unconditionally, was thinking about you constantly, and supported you no matter what. Even for the smallest of victories, she treated like momentous occasions. For example, after I placed 15th in a middle school cross-country championship, I received this email. Hey, champ. I know you will always be the best you can be. You have that wonderful combination of determination and ability. Enjoy the satisfaction and the attention. You deserve it. Love, Grandma. And people wonder where we all get our inflated sense of self and confidence. Grandma always supported us no matter what we were doing, even if she didn't really understand why. After I spent the summer, when I was 19, I spent the summer in Madagascar studying lemurs. And Grandma and I were frequent email pen pals. And I was just looking through my phone, and I found a letter from her at the time. Dear Hannah, your letters have been amazing and so enlightening. You already know that your adventure is one I would never pursue myself. When Grandpa and I read your last letter, we thought eyes were llamas. Thank you for clearing this up. I can understand that this has been a very rewarding experience for you. Not always rosy, but certainly educational. I do hope that more of your education will be in a safe and comfortable environment. We are very proud of your bravery, but worried about your fears. Let us know when you are back in civilization and less anxious. We love you dearly, Grandma and Grandpa. I'm sure, you were there, but I knew this kid from Grandma. So on the way back from Madagascar, I spent a night at Moorwood Oaks. And as I, was answering questions and telling stories about this summer, Grandma kept coming up behind me to hug me and tell me how proud she was and how brave I was, to go and follow my dreams. But she also did make me promise to stay in the United States for at least a year so she wouldn't have to spend all this time worrying about me. So anyways, I love you, Grandma. I'm always just trying to make you proud. I know that we did.
I'm so lucky to have had grandma and grandpa as such an active part of my life. As a kid, grandpa would always be the one down on the floor messing around with us, riling us up. But we all knew that grandma was the one who was taking care of us, always making sure we had our favorite foods around, that we were happy. And as Hannah alluded to, if worrying is a sign of love, she definitely loved us. I was incredibly fortunate to have the opportunity to go to Ireland with 3 of my grandparents, grandma, grandpa, and my Oma, to celebrate my high school graduation. It was a whole TAP tour bus of me and 65 plus. And grandma was so proud to have me with her. She would brag about me right in front of me, which as a teenager certainly made me a little bit embarrassed. But she also talked a lot about all my fellow cousins and brother, and really made us all made me feel like she was always proud and always supported us. Grandma was really the one who kept this family together. It was so important to her that me and my cousins grew up close. And I really felt that throughout the childhood. It really feels like because of her care and her efforts that we are such a cohesive family today. And there's really no better example than every Thanksgiving, where our families gathered and stayed in Port Washington, and we had our own version of Christmas morning with matching PJs. And we had our photos of all the girls in our matching PJs, and Eric was there too. But we will always have those pictures of us in the PJs, and we will keep her memory alive with our memories and with our relationships with each other.
Just like Natalie said, there was nothing I looked forward to more to a trip to Grandma's house. I can still conjure the feelings of pulling open the door to 67 Moorwood Oaks. After 87 Moorwood Oaks. They were quite surprised to see me. So after Grandpa would pick us up from the airport and we survived a harrowing late night drive to Port Washington, Grandma would still be up, eagerly waiting for us, standing in her nightgown, waiting by the window. Entering the house was entering Grandma's domain and surrendering to her care. Time slowed down, my senses activated. I remember the wafting scent of Grandma Pat's perfume, the hand lotion in the upstairs bathroom, the dusty bookshelves in Grandpa's study, and of course, the delectable smell coming from the kitchen. She never forgot our favorites: roasted potatoes, caramelized zucchini, buttered corn, thin and crispy lemon chicken. In contrast, back in Chapel Hill and Lakeshore Lane, my close family lived in a state of organized chaos. Perpetually running late, my sisters and I would argue with each other, be rude to our parents, and make a mess. What a joy it was to embrace the order and time-tested rituals of a visit to Port Washington. When I sat next to Grandma on the couch, I could feel Grandma's affection. She always stroked my back with her manicured nails, asking thoughtful questions. She would be hand knitting us sweaters, ponchos, and blankets, prized possessions I still have today. I hold my memories of Grandma with me in all sorts of treasured keepsakes like these pearls of hers. She reminded me to wear the pearls often. They would glow more when they touched my chest, And in grandma's eyes, I was always glowing. I love to cook, and grandma was clearly my only inspiration in that matter. And when I lose my way in the kitchen, I'm reminded of another pearl of wisdom from grandma. When in doubt, if there's one thing I can trust, it's Ina Garten, the barefoot Contessa.
I am the baby of the cousins, the baby of the family. Although I might not look the baby, I always think I had a special place in grandma's mind and grandma's heart, in that role. When we visited, as Danielle Lovely talked about, everyone had their own place to sleep. Eric was always in the basement. Everyone had their spot, and I was always in grandma and grandpa's room. I had an air mattress set up right next to their bed, and there's this big mirror on one of the walls next to me. And so I could look over whenever I was in their room, and I could see grandma sleeping next to me a little bit up in their bed, just watching over me. Sometimes the five of us would all hang out in the morning on grandma and grandpa's bed. And I like to say I had the shortest commute. I just hopped up right onto the bed. When we would spend time together in Port Washington, many times my older cousins would do their own things, have stuff, and grandma and I would spend time together. We would go shopping or get our nails done, which, as Danielle alluded to, is not something that I would do much at home with my parents. But we would also play cards or do a puzzle, which she loved. Always me and her together. She, of course, made sure we were well fed. I can remember very specific grandma delicacies that we only got in Port Washington. She would cut up the strawberries and sprinkle a little bit of sugar on top because they could never be too sweet. She would always make me homemade BLTs, which was different because we never had bacon at home. So that was a real treat. And then, of course, on the classic ski trips that were so important to our family, I was too young to go to ski school when we went to Vermont. And I don't necessarily remember this, but I have been told that while everybody else went out to the slopes and went skiing, grandma stayed back to take care of me. And so I think everybody liked it this way, but everybody else was out on the slopes, and grandma stayed back with me.
All right. Well, thank you, Gary. Thank you, kids. Fantastic. Of course. Let me just repeat my brother's thanks for everybody for being here to honor my mom and to support our family. And thank you, of course, for the people who are listening who wanted to be here but not able to. And if you measure a life by the relationships that you made during it, I think my mom is going to rank very high. She and my dad were either dating or married for 67 years. The Lapidus and Arnold are here 65 years or close to that. The Port Washington crew, many of whom are here today. We're talking about a half a century friendships. That's amazing. When I think back on my life, sometimes you're asked, like, who are your role models? I didn't have to look very far. It was my parents, my mom, my dad. Ultimately, my mom was an educator. My dad was on the school board and an adjunct professor. Took me a while to find out, but being an educator, teacher was what I was meant to be. And, my childhood was a childhood, but, it was also a tutorial. Uh, they didn't quite know what to do with me when I arrived at the Manor Haven School kindergarten, already knowing how to read, knowing how to add as well, but only to 6+6 because of the hundreds of games of Parcheesi I had already played. Not only had I played those games, my father had pointed out all the bad moves I had made. Anyway, we had a terrific childhood, family dinners every night, parents, one or two at all the ball games, all the many plays and concerts. Weekends and from December till March when the snow melted up in Vermont, and many weekends after the snow had melted in Vermont. And there was one strip of snow down the Yodler, surrounded by patches of mud, but we were still there. Loads of family events in Long Island. The cycle was kind of like the Jewish holiday cycle, always the same every year. Malcolm's for Mother's Day, Larry for Father's Day, Malcolm's again for Thanksgiving, Grandma's for Christmas Eve. Sorry, Rabbi, and then us for Passover, and then we'd repeat the same thing again for the next year, over and over. Gary and I were not indulged, but we were certainly not deprived. Just the right balance. And my mom, together with my dad, did this. When I think about my childhood, I think about a great song from Paul Simon that I really like. And the last verse goes like this: never been lonely, never been lied to, never had to scuffle in fear, nothing denied to. Born at the instant the bells are chiming, the whole world listening, born at the right time. My mother was the most selfless person I have ever known. Hers was a life of service. Service to her children, service to her husband, service to her family, her dear mother. It was always about what she could do for somebody else, not for herself. And she probably did this to a fault. Indeed, today, I don't really know what my mom liked to do for herself. I don't really think she thought about it all that much. I know she loved her friends and service to her friends as well. And long, long telephone calls in the evening with many of you who are here today and listening. And she was sought out as an advisor because she was a good listener, and she probably gave really good advice too. She also had to take calls from my father's sister and mother to hear about their mishigas and complaints about my father, that problems that he didn't want to deal with, but they fell to my mother too. And she handled it, and maybe she did complain a little bit about that, but she handled those as well. She would have loved having a daughter to have all these deep heart-to-heart talks with. Instead, she got two sons and stony silence. What an injustice. And then, of course, as my brother talked about, the things that she did for my grandmother, her mom. The whole elder care system that we have today, while imperfect, didn't exist back then. And she had to pull it all together and essentially make it up by scratch. But she put her heart and soul into caring for my grandmother for many, many years. And it was a beautiful thing. And I think my dad saw that. And when it came time for him to do the job, as my brother so eloquently spoke, he did the hard job, but he did it for longer than my mom did for her mom, 8 years. And he truly honored my mother. It was an act of true selflessness, and he kept her in the apartment until only a mere 2 weeks before she passed. And that is exactly what she wanted. Dad, you always taught Gary and I to do the right thing, and that was the right thing to do. And that's something I really want, especially the young woman that you just heard from, but everybody to know. Even though the gender roles at 87 Walwood Oaks were pretty traditional and well defined, your grandmother was an ardent feminist. She really was. You might recall when Hillary Clinton, during the 1992 campaign, was being interviewed, she was asked if she was going to be part of her husband's administration if they won. And she said something along the lines of, well, what do you think I'm going to do? Stay at home and bake cookies? That was my mom saying those things, but 20 years earlier. And she was saying them to him. And that's true. Yeah, and it's true. Our household was not one where we did have a lot of baked cookies. And indeed, when my mom, on the occasions that she did, she had so much on her mind that half the time she left them in the oven too long and they burned. And my father can attest to that, coming home to a house full of smoke on many occasions. But mom was a dedicated professional and a super hard worker. On a normal weekday, she would work from 8:30 to 3:30, come home and deal with us kids, go shopping, cook dinner, help clean up, sometimes with our help, sometimes not. And then she would sit down with a briefcase full of work, often until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And she faced plenty of misogyny and discrimination in the workplace as well. She certainly would have been a high school principal and maybe a superintendent of schools if she had been a man. But I never heard her complain about any of that unfairness. She was good at what she did, and she provided tremendous service for a lot of very needy kids. Sometimes when I think about my mom's career and what she did, I think about the scene and the end of Schindler's List, when Oskar Schindler is thinking about how many people he saved, and he said, I could have done so much more. I could have taken this ring off. I could have saved another person. And I think about how many people my mother saved. And if you filled the rows of chairs in this room, and then you had another room, and another room, and another room, auditorium filled with kids. That's what she did. It's a great legacy. As everyone has said, my mother was a first-degree worrier. Never has so much worrying been done by someone who had so little to worry about. She also had a tendency to exaggerate things, I think maybe to justify the amount of worrying that she was doing. She didn't make a mountain out of the molehill, she made a Grand Canyon out of a molehill. And we like to call it the orange multiplier effect in our family. Now, apparently this trait is hereditary, as my kids accuse me of doing the same thing. They call it OMG, orange multiplier. Oh my God. But that's what my mother did worry a lot. Now, I think I did a pretty good job of making my mother proud. I went through my life pretty much as expected, but I did surprise her once. And that's when I brought Liz into our lives. She's from St. Louis, my mom said, as if I had told her I had a girlfriend from Ouagadougou. Not that there's anything wrong with Ouagadougou. And then Liz would tell her about her field work in the Amazon rainforest. So you're going to sleep in the tents with all the bugs and the muck? This was not her idealized version of a possible wife for her eldest son, the Prince of Port Washington. Liz also made the mistake of mentioning all the possible exposure to tropical diseases and bugs that could bite you and lay their eggs in her scalp. Finally, my mother had something to really worry about. Another problem with Liz in my mother's mind is that this Amazon woman who's her son brought home would be spending so much time with the crocodiles and the apes and the plants and the tropical palms that she wouldn't have neither time nor interest in producing a grandchild, a high crime and misdemeanor. Fortunately, then Valerie came along. Now, my mother never said this, but I could see her thinking, now that's more like it. Now, it turns out that my mom was a pretty soft mark for Liz. It didn't take long for Liz to go from an enigma to a curiosity to an amusement to a loved daughter. And in her declining years, when I would call to say that I was coming to see her, the first thing she would say was, "How about Elizabeth?" The prince had been eclipsed. Liz was great with my mom. They painted and did puzzles together. Liz somehow got her to have a conversation when nobody else could. And she loved spending time with Valerie too, and she talked about that often. It took a while, but she finally got the daughters to talk to. My mother was pretty blunt sometimes. Lois Coleman wrote in and said, you know, your mother always told us what she thought. I'll give you one short story. Liz and went to get to Kleinfelder's to shop with my mom and her mom for a wedding dress. And under duress, I'll point out, not Liz's thing. But she went and they, took lots of elegant dresses Liz was forced to try on that she rejected out of hand. Finally, they brought out the kind of cheapest dress that they had at Kleinfelder's, and Liz admitted and said this one would do. Probably not the dress that my mother would have preferred. And it had a train, and the train needed to be cut off. All my mother could say to Liz is, make sure you don't cut the train off too short. You don't want to look like a lampshade at your wedding. On one of my last trips to Florida, she said to me last time I saw her, "So when are you going to shave the beard off? You look like Moses." The comparison to Moses was not a compliment. Anyway, I could go on, but like life itself, there's no good way to end a eulogy. But both of them must come to an end. Mom, you were a wonderful mother and wife, family member, friend to many. You were a skilled educator. You loved many people loved you. We'll all miss you very much.
We'll now share together Psalm 23. I just want to highlight the two words at the end of the third line, still waters. When I think of the still waters, I think of two things. Number one, to be at peace and to know that with the difficulties of life, there are moments that we can find that peace and be at peace. And number two, in the still waters, that's precisely when we see the reflections not just of ourselves, but in the stories I've heard so far, and we've seen the reflection of how Pat is a part of us and shining through us. Let's read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, thy cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I'm blown away by the beautiful words and the images and the impact that Pat had on your lives. And with your permission, I heard that she loved music, and I came across this quote by Victor Hugo. Music expresses that which cannot be put into words and that which cannot remain silent. Pat's life was that type of music. It was a melody rich with harmony and meaning, filled with both moments of quiet reflection and joyous crescendos. And she understood life wasn't just about reaching a destination, it was about singing and dancing while the music played. And from the very beginning, when I got to hear about the love song that was her life and the remarkable relationship she had with her beloved, and how Bob could tell you it was love at first sight when he saw Pat at North Shore Country Club. And that's when their duet began. And their life was filled with companionship and active social life that we heard about. Her warmth, her love that we heard so much about, her generosity was a testament to the loving example set by her mother, Natalie, and passed down through Pat's family. And these were the same qualities that she instilled in her family, building that home that you heard about, where love was the chorus that played over and over again. Through her medical challenges, she never complained, and she showed us how a family is a source of both strength and resilience, a harmony that can carry us through life's most difficult measures. And it wasn't just a pastime for Pat, music, it was part of her soul. She sang in the choir, using her voice to connect with her faith, her Jewish heritage, and her community. Gary shared that love of music, and Pat shep nachas from his performances, always so proud of the gifts he shared with the world. Her songs weren't just heard, they were felt, a reflection of her spirit that lifted those around her. Her life's work also carried a melody of compassion. We heard about her degree in special education and the hard work and her dedication to students with special needs, her patience, her ability to listen, and willingness to give of her time were all lessons for us. She understood that every child deserved to be heard and valued, and she gave them the tools to find their own voices. David could tell you about his mother's work ethic, how remarkable it was, how she balanced it all, taking care of every detail, tending to the family needs. You could still picture her sitting at the table on those Sunday nights, working diligently like a composer shaping a symphony, preparing lesson plans with precision and care, ensuring every note was right for the week ahead. And family was everything to Pat. And we heard about in Long Island how you all would come together and celebrate and share those holidays, and that became the soundtrack of your lives. So what can we carry forward from Pat's song? We carry forward her love, the love she gave so freely and unconditionally. We carry her patience, kindness, dedication to family, all in the joy of music. And we honor her by continuing to sing, to dance, to cherish the music in our own lives. May the spirit of Pat Schanzer continue to live on in us and through us, and let us say, Amen. We'll now share the El Malay prayer. I'm going to invite you to please rise. I'll recite it both in English and in Hebrew. God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant peace beneath the shelter of your presence to this beloved soul. Let her rest in the heights of the holy and pure, who shine with the splendor of the heavens. May she, Pat Schanzer, rest in the Garden of Eden. Please, source of mercy, guard her beneath the protection of your wings for all eternity. Bind her soul in the bonds of life, for you are her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. The last mitzvah, the last deed, is to recite the mourner's Kaddish. The mourner's Kaddish is recited now and throughout the week of Shiva, and then it's recited this entire year as a mourner, and then each year on the anniversary of her death on the Yortzeit. And there's something powerful about the Kaddish, the cadence of the words. These words written in Aramaic. Aramaic doesn't belong to the angels. As a matter of fact, they say angels don't speak Aramaic. It was the language of the people. It's a very human language because angels don't understand birth and death. They don't understand all the vicissitudes of life. We humans understand it. And in that sense, the Kaddish is a very human prayer to live fully. It talks only about life. And we can almost imagine her whispering to us these words of the Kaddish, reminding us to engage in life as fully as she did. There will be a Shiva service following at 2:30, from 2:30 to 5:30 this afternoon at the home of Bob Schanzer. And the power of community is what this is all about. So if you feel comfortable, I invite you to please put your hand around the person next to you and come a little bit closer as we recite the words of the mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yizgadash shemei rabah. V'alma divrach v'yotei v'amlich malchutei. B'chayechon v'yomeichon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabah mevorach leolam ulmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaser. V'yithadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei d'kusha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran v'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'akol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mamav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'akol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates peace and harmony in the heavens above grant each and every one of us peace in our lives, to which we say amen. And now we say to our dear Pat, Lechi b'shalom, v'tanuchi al mishkavrech b'shalom, v'tomdi l'gorlech v'keit taimim. Go in peace and rest in peace. The final custom is for the mourners to receive consolation from all of us who have come to give our tanchumim, our comfort. And so I'm going to ask that those of you who have come to help the family and be there and support them to line up on each side of this alley. You'll make a row for the family to then walk through. And as they walk through, it's an opportunity to give them a wink. You can give them a hug, a handshake, a smile, a nod, or words of consolation.